Hi everyone, so welcome to the latest interview for YA Philicon. Today I'm joined by Morgan Baden and we're going to be talking all about her new book that's just released earlier this week. Yep, there it is. We'll be talking about like writing inspiration, favourite YA thrillers and mysteries, and advice for aspiring writers. So this is a live broadcast to YouTube, so if you're watching live and you have any questions for Morgan or myself, then you can just pop them in the Q&A chat. It's a little box just to the, I think it's to the right side of the stream on YouTube. And we'll be able to see your questions live, so it's a really great opportunity to sort of engage with us and ask questions and get answers sort of pretty much straight away. Yeah, this is the second day of YA Philicon, so if you want to check out the panels, interviews and readings that we've already had, or the ones that are coming up later today, you can go to our website, which is www.yaphilicon.co.uk. So thank you so much for joining me, Morgan. Would you like to introduce yourself and your latest book?
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Morgan Baden. I am a YA author and ghostwriter, and also sort of separately a communications consultant. I spent a long time in communications for Scholastic, the world's largest children's book distributor and publisher. So I'm well versed in the children's publishing world, and I've been writing for a long time, ghostwriting, and then last year my debut novel, The Hive, came out, co-written with Barry Lyga, who happens to be my husband. And then just this week, Daphne and Velma, The Dark Deception, was released on Tuesday. And its sequel will be out in 2021. And I'm thrilled to be here.
That's so exciting. So yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit about your latest book then? Just for like viewers who don't know anything about it.
Sure. So this book, it's actually a trilogy. A different author wrote the first one, Josephine Ruby. That book came out in March of this year. It's called The Vanishing Girl. It's really great. And it's essentially, it's a YA reboot of Scooby-Doo featuring Daphne and Velma. And it's really exciting because they are high school best friends. And when my editor pitched the series to me, she phrased it as sort of Veronica Mars, but with ghosts. And I was super excited about that because I love Veronica Mars. Daphne and Velma live in a small town called Crystal Cove in California, where spooky things happen all of the time. And you know, this world takes place sort of before, separately, but also related to the world of Scooby-Doo that we all know and love. So, so with Shaggy and Fred, and of course Scooby, they all make appearances in this book to varying degrees. And there's a little bit of background information about them in it. And we certainly leave a lot of Easter eggs for fans of Scooby-Doo. So there's lots of references to the Mystery Machine, and you know, Velma will say, Velma's cat is named Jinkies, and they'll say Zoinks occasionally. So we do throw in some of those iconic Scooby-Doo moments. But in this book in particular, The Dark Deception, Daphne and Velma have to solve a mystery that happens in Crystal Cove. And they get thrown off course quite a bit. And there's lots of evidence that it's supernatural in nature. But of course, Velma is sort of the skeptic there, and Daphne's a little bit more of a believer. And so they have to balance those out. And there's it's a lot of fun. Friendship, romance, mystery, it's all in there.
Oh, that does sound so much fun. So, like, how did you actually get involved in that?
Yeah, so
like, how did the opportunity for this sort of like arise to write something like character?
Right. So it's really funny with IP like this. So intellectual property. So a brand that is owned by someone else, in this case, Warner Brother owns Scooby-Doo. They were already working with Scholastic on this idea, and they needed writers. And honestly, my agent just reached out and asked what they had available. And they came to me with Daphne and Velma. And I actually dressed up as Velma for Halloween once when I was in college. So when they presented the idea to me, it felt right. It felt perfect. And so it happened. And it's really interesting working on IP like this because in some ways it's really great because the world already exists. So there's a really rich history that I can pull from. But at the same time, there are limits, right? Because I can't do anything I want with these characters because they technically belong to someone else. So it's striking that balance between creating a character that is familiar enough to people who know the brand, while also making it so that it's not required that you know anything about Scooby-Doo to read these books, because you don't need to. It's a standalone story. And they're standalone characters.
Okay. Yeah, so like I imagine it was so exciting being able to like write with these characters who you already knew and who a lot of people do already know. What was it like actually sort of like sitting down for the first time and writing a scene with these characters? Like, did it feel really surreal?
It did feel surreal. Actually, it was funny. Right before I started writing, my husband and I were in a store. This was obviously way back before the pandemic, when stores were open. And we found a little Daphne and Velma figurine characters just sitting on a shelf. And I was like, it feels like fate. So I have those sitting next to my desk. And I did a lot of, I like to say research, but really it just involved sitting down on the TV and watching old Scooby-Doo episodes. But, as you can imagine, with a brand like this, there's a brand Bible, there are character studies, like I said, there's so much history to draw from. And my editor, Beth Dunphy, actually years and years ago also edited a line of Scooby-Doo picture books. So she herself is really into the brand and knows so much about it. So she sent me a lot of information from back then. And it was like, truly, when I tried to capture the vibe, it was a lot of like YouTubing old Scooby episodes. And then also, like I said, I'm a big Veronica Mars fan, and I really wanted to capture that kind of spooky small town feel with mystery. So I watched a couple more Veronica Mars episodes and really tried to immerse myself in the atmosphere. But then sitting down to write it was, like you said, it was really surreal. And it was also really interesting because I've always thought that Velma was my favorite character. And then when I was writing these, it turned out I liked writing Daphne so much more.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was a surprise to me, and I love Velma, and I get, it was a pleasure to write them both. But I think I had a little bit more fun with Daphne because I think I tried to give her some more layers than what she usually has. And I think with Velma too, but it was just interesting because it wasn't what I expected. It was a nice surprise to like Daphne so much.
Yeah. It is great when like you get those surprises and when sort of like you're drawn to specific characters like unexpectedly as well.
Yeah, it's sort of the magic of writing, right? When you sit down and you think, I know exactly what this character is going to be about, and then halfway through the book you realize, oh, I've changed them significantly, and they've surprised me, and it's interesting to sort of follow the surprise.
Definitely. So what was the actual writing process like? Like, did you have to like outline it extensively first and get that approved before you then started the actual writing of it?
Yeah, I had to write a synopsis first. Well, I should say first, I presented 2 or 3 different ideas, just sort of 1 to 2 paragraph ideas for what this would be about. And again, I came in at book 2, so I had to read book 1 first, get the background there, come up with a couple of options, present those. And then both my editor at Scholastic and Warner Brothers had to approve one of those options. So then they came with the approval. And then from there, I turned that into a fuller synopsis. So it was probably 2 or 3 pages. So not super detailed, but enough that Warner Brothers felt comfortable with my going off and writing a whole book from it. And it's funny, all of those those steps all take time, right? So, I would turn in a couple of ideas and then have to wait a couple of weeks, and then turn in a synopsis, which itself takes time to write, and then wait a few weeks to get approval. So it took a while to even sort of sit down and get started writing, which is good in a way, because then I sort of got to marinate on it in my head, not actually working on it yet, which I always find really helpful. And then we would, let's see, I think once the synopsis was fully approved, I just took it and ran. I didn't have to like send in chapter by chapter. There wasn't a halfway point that I needed to send over before I could continue. I just wrote the whole thing. I think it was about 60,000 words, and then sent it off to my editor. And then we said, she looked at it. I don't think she sent it to Warner Brothers at that point. I think then she and I just connected about it, did a round of edits. And then at that point, then it was out of my hands, because then she took it to Warner Brothers. They went through it. There were a couple of changes they had to make, because again, that's the really interesting part about doing IP, is that things that I wouldn't even think of, they came back and said, oh, this character absolutely cannot do that, because of all of these historical reasons. And I was like, that makes perfect sense. So they would make little changes like that to the characters. And then there was one note that I found that I loved. It was my favorite note. When Warner Brothers came back with the second draft, they said, this whole part, there was like a whole chapter, and they were like, let's make it more ghosts. Throw in some more ghosts. And I was like, I can definitely do that. So, so it was lots of little notes like that.
Okay. That sounds really fun. And I'm quite curious, because you said that you had to like write the synopsis first to get that approved. Is that how you would normally write a book? Because like, I know from my own point of view, if I write a synopsis first, I completely lose interest in my story, and I have to like write the whole first draft first with like no idea what is going to happen. I mean, it does make my draft so messy, and I end up with so much like editorial work to do afterwards that I could have saved. But yeah, I was just thinking, like, if I had to write a synopsis first and then sort of like stick to that outline, I would just lose like interest in it. So yeah, is that how you normally work?
So the funny thing is that normally I do not do that, but since then I now do it. I'm working on a brand new book unrelated to Daphne and Velma, and I found it so helpful to have that blueprint in front of me. But I'm also a very, like, if I sit down with just an idea and no concrete vision of how I'm getting to that idea, I will spend years just writing like scenes that aren't connected or that don't have anything to do with the story I was trying to tell. I've always, in my writing, I've always struggled with actually advancing the plot to the next scene and connecting moments. So I found it so helpful. And then I had to do it again for book 3, which comes out next year, that I feel like I sort of trained myself to write a synopsis first. So that's what I've done for this next book. But with the caveat that I allow a lot of room for flexibility. So there's certainly, like, I should go back actually and look at the synopsis for The Dark Deception, because I'm sure the book has turned out quite different from what I actually initially planned. And especially with certain subplots that organically came up as I was writing the book that are not at all mentioned in the synopsis. So you definitely have to leave room for those. And almost like the characters, they surprised me. So I started going down certain paths and I was like, oh, this isn't in the synopsis. Is the studio going to like it? But it doesn't matter because it fits beautifully and I really like it. And so I'm going to keep going and see where it leads me. So lots of surprises with the plot as well.
Yeah, but it does sound like quite flexible when you sort of like explain that you have got like this level of creative freedom, even outside of what you've written in the sort of like synopsis.
Yes. So, yeah. I mean, basically, I think my mind frame now is write a synopsis, but don't be married to it. It's okay if you change it or add things as you go.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You're working on book 3 of this trilogy as well. What was it like having like the first book that someone else had written? Did you have to sort of like match the same sort of like writing style in the book?
Yeah, and luckily, so I read the book first, of course, book 1, before I even agreed to do the rest of it. And And luckily I loved it. And I felt like, oh, this voice actually feels quite a bit like mine already. So, but I will say I referred to it regularly as I was writing. I've got the hard copy right here at my desk, and I would constantly open it up and be like, oh, what did she do here? Oh, this. Okay, that makes sense. Then I can do X, Y, Z in my plot. So it was a lot of referring back. And, I'm a ghostwriter as well. So I've ghostwritten several YA novels. And in my day job as a communications consultant, a lot of what I do is ghostwrite. I've ghostwritten celebrity speeches and executive speeches and things like that. So I have a knack anyway for matching voice and tone of someone else. So it worked out nicely, but truly, I think book one, The Vanishing Girl, is a really great read. So I was really happy to, mimic as much as I could in ways that made sense, while also, my name is on books 2 and 3. So making sure that it feels like me as well.
Yeah, exactly. So where do you get your inspiration from then?
Oh, goodness. I mean, a little bit of everything. There's that old cliche of, your best ideas come to you when you're not when you're not trying to solve them or find them. So I will often wake up first thing in the morning and have like a line of dialogue or a plot point or something like that, just at the front of my head that I immediately have to jot down. But also I get a lot of inspiration from other pop culture moments. So especially again, with a brand like this, there's so many of them. But it's a little bit of everything. It's real life scenarios. It's things I imagined that I wanted to happen at certain points in my life, but didn't. But then I can write them that way in a book with different characters, and so then it kind of feels like it did happen to me. So lots of places. I also get lots of clarity in the shower, of course, as a lot of people say. And actually, it was funny. Just last night, I was just about asleep, and suddenly this line of dialogue came into my head, and I had to wake myself up and write it down in a note on my phone for the new book that I'm working on. So, it happens all the time. And sometimes it doesn't happen at all. And that's when I have to, go for a run or go for a walk or do something totally different. And try and light that fire inside.
Oh yeah, that's often how it does happen. I mean, I know from like my own experience, like I get so much inspiration just like when I'm like outside walking about in nature and just like doing sort of everyday things as well. It's just like it's sort of like just sort of what's the word, like cultivates. Like, yeah, and it's just always there, like in subconsciously. You are still thinking even when you're not actively thinking about.
Right. Yeah. Which in a way is hard because I strive to be present in everything I do. But I think when you're in the middle of a book, I almost think you can't be present all the time because there's always a part of your head that's in the book, which again is both good and bad. But when you're on a tight deadline, it's good because you've got to get it done.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I think you mentioned that you're currently working on 2 different manuscripts, like book 3 of this trilogy and then also another project. Do you normally work on like multiple projects at the same time?
I didn't used to. And then it sort of happened organically. And I actually quite like it because it's sort of a nice brain break. So right now with book 3, I'm actually awaiting edits from my editor. So it's like in the back of my head that they're coming and I'm going to have to re-immerse myself in this book, in this world. But in the meantime, I'm working on my next book. But also, some other creative writing projects. I have some book clients and I help them with editing and book coaching and things like that. And then also separately, I have my communications work. So I have some other clients where I'm doing corporate writing and corporate editing. Yeah. So it's a nice, I get to sort of use and test all parts of my brain all throughout the day, which is nice.
So I imagine that would help quite a lot of like if you experience writer's block with one project, you can just switch to another project and sort of like get a new energy from it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, what are your favorite YA thrillers and mysteries then?
So at the start of the pandemic, I started reading Maureen Johnson's Truly Devious trilogy.
Oh
It
yeah,
is
I've read the first
so good. Yeah, so it definitely shot up to the top of my favorites list. I feel like I inhaled that trilogy. I think I read all 3 books in probably the first like 3 to 4 weeks of the pandemic here in the States. And I feel like they saved me. They were so good. I love E. Lockhart's We Were Liars. I love a sort of psychological thriller like that with an unreliable narrator and beautiful language and a mystery. So that book is sort of the whole package for me. I love, I'm a little biased here, but I love Barry Lyga's thrillers. I Hunt Killers is wonderful. So lately I feel like I've been into in the summer, I tend to read more like beachy things. I tend to read seasonally. So right now I'm in some beachy things, but I always start to stack up a list of thrillers and supernatural stories for the fall. So I'm getting my list together for that right now. But yeah, I would have to say I think my favorite YA thriller at the moment is Maureen Johnson's trilogy.
Yeah, I need to read Victor Timofeyev back because I've read the first one and it was just amazing.
So good, yeah.
Yeah,
she just announced she just announced a standalone title. The same character. Yeah, it was just a couple weeks ago. The same characters, a standalone novel that's sort of like a continuation of the themes, but not the actual mystery, which has been solved.
Oh, that is exciting. I need to look out for that then. Yeah, because I thought it was just the trilogy that was out. I mean, I finished book 1 a couple of weeks ago of that. So yeah, I need to get my hands on book 2 now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So next should we talk about any advice that you have for aspiring writers, people wanting to write in the YA thriller genre?
Sure.
Do you have any tips for me?
Yeah, I think the number one tip is always, and people always say this, but it's really just about putting your butt in the chair. Just get out words. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad, if you think they're crap, whatever. I think it's so important you have to train yourself to actually write. It's great if you have a great idea. I'm sure you get this all the time too. I always have people say, "Oh, I have such a great idea for a book. You should write it for me." And I'm like, "No, write it yourself. I have my own ideas." But I really, in a way, I think there's a lot of aspiring writers out there who maybe surrender too quickly and give up too easily, because I think you really just have to keep pushing. A lot of the advice is write every day. And I think that's fine advice, but it's not practical for everyone. So I don't like to say write every day. I like to say write as often as you can. I like to make an author friend of mine, Nisha Sharma, is a big planner person and, lists and actual paper planners. And I got a lot of inspiration watching her outline her planning routine on Instagram. And then she spoke about it with me in a webinar we did a few months ago, where every Sunday she sits down and physically writes down in her planner, I'm going to write X thousand words this week. And I think I'll do them on these days because that's what my schedule allows for right now. But no matter what, at the end of the week, I want to have 5,000 words written or 2,000 words written, whatever it is. And I found that really inspiring, because I think especially now for me, during the pandemic, when things felt really out of control, it was a really nice way to regain some control, which is to say, I can control my writing. I can control how often I'm producing work each day, and make it a point, make it a priority to do so. So I would give that advice to aspiring writers. If you're having trouble finding the time or finding the inspiration, just write it in your calendar, even, whether it's a half hour a week or 4 hours a week, whatever it is, jot it down somewhere and hold yourself accountable to that time. And I would also say, even if you're not, let's say you do that and then you sit down at your computer or at your notepad or your typewriter, and you just can't get any words out, at least you're training yourself to make the time to do so and to focus for a few moments. And maybe that's just the step one for you. So maybe you need to adjust to that kind of thinking before the words will come. But, you know, my whole career has been in corporate communications, which means I've been writing to a deadline since I was 21 years old. I've been on deadlines, you know, outside of school. So you really get used to just having to focus and get out the words. And I know that's easier said than done, but you know, I've never had the luxury of allowing myself to not write. Do you know what I mean? Like if I have something due, well, then it's due and I have to go write it. And that's kind of what I loved about my ghostwriting experience. And you and I were talking earlier before this went live that the first book I ghost wrote, they handed me a 25-page outline and said, now go turn this into 50,000 words. And by the way, do it in 5 weeks. And I was working full time at the time. So it was a wild time, but I did it. And it was one of those things where I didn't have a choice to not do it. And something in that experience, I think really trained my brain and my writing muscle to be able to work quickly like that when I needed to.
Yeah, like I know that I definitely work best with my first drafts if I'm sort of like writing them as quickly as possible. Just to sort of get everything out, and then I can like worry about the editing, the shape of it later.
Definitely.
I really love like the events where you write 50,000 words in a month for that reason, like NaNoWriMo. Yeah. So have you done any of the NaNoWriMo events?
I did years and years ago. I think I did it 2 years in a row. Never hit the 50,000 deadline either of those years. But again, I think that's really great training ground. And I think especially now too, with writers groups and with Facebook groups and Twitter groups and all these communities online, I think you can get a lot of guidance and inspiration. You know, I'll see a writer say on, 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning on Twitter, say, anyone want to do 1,000 words with me real quick? Let's go, let's do a sprint. And then people chime in and then they log off of Twitter and go write their 1,000 words and then check back in. And I think that accountability really helps some people too. So any kind of accountability groups you can find like that, if that's what motivates you, then we're lucky that we're at a time where we can so easily access those kinds of groups.
Definitely. Because like I'm in some workshopping groups, and just sort of like knowing that I have to turn in a chapter every 2 weeks to get other people in my workshop, it's just so like it really motivates me to actually keep working on this manuscript. Like even when I get to a point where I absolutely hate it and never want to touch it again, I feel that I need to keep working on it because I know that like, the other writers in my workshop group are waiting for it.
Right.
And the accountability is just so important, especially when like writing can be quite a lonely sort of career.
Totally. Yeah. I was just saying, I don't know if you like to write in a home office or if you go out to coffee shops or anything like that. I do a mix of both. I love my home office, but normally I love maybe once, maybe twice a week, I'll take my laptop to a coffee shop and write there. And something about the activity level there and the background noise puts me in a different head frame and lets me write differently and sometimes even faster than I would at home. And I'm really missing that now because I live in New Jersey and indoor dining is still closed. So I can't go into a coffee shop and write, and I'm really missing it.
Yeah, it is strange, like how our writing is influenced by the actual locations that we're in at the time of writing. And
definitely,
like just the energy levels are so different, and that does like affect what we're writing.
Yes.
But yeah, as you say, like with the pandemic, a lot of things have like changed at the moment, and like, well, there's definitely a rise in like online events like this sort of thing. Because like we can't do like physical, like in-person events. So yeah. Was there anything else that you'd like to talk about the Dark Deception or any of your like writing career or anything?
I don't think so. The Dark Deception came out this past Tuesday, so it hasn't even been out for a week, which is very exciting. So go grab a copy if you can. And I'll keep everyone posted. I don't have a title or a pub date yet for the next book in the trilogy, but it'll be sometime in 2021. And thank you so much. This was so fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. So yeah, if you're watching this and you want to check out any of the other panels, interviews, or live readings, then it's all on the website, yathriller.co.uk. So thank you.
Bye. Thank you.